Bum, bum, bum. I feel like I have to look at the camera to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Curtis Crotty,
And I'm Joe Deerdorf.
and we're real estate agents here in Chicago. And today we're going to talk all about interest rates. So one thing that I think, Joe, that I wanted to clear up is this misconception that the Fed dictates your mortgage rate. Everybody talks about, oh, the Fed is raising rates, and it's not a direct correlation to mortgage rates. I think, yes, the banks and the 10-year treasury bond follow what the Fed is saying and what they're doing as a guideline, but it's not an apples to apple raise.
So what do you tell your clients when they say, oh, I'm seeing that the feds are raising rates? What does that mean for my mortgage rate?
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, when the Fed rate goes up, we can expect that mortgage rates go up too. But I want people to understand that it's not a direct linear. So if the Fed raises it 75 basis points, that doesn't mean that your mortgage rate's going to go up. The federal rate is what's used between banks when they loan each other money, and the mortgage rates are really based off of the 10-year treasury bond and what that's doing. So I think just keep in mind that it's not an apples to apples thing, and we can use it as a guideline, but it's not.
Sage advice. I mean, what I like to do is say, hey, let's call our lender. I mean, this is where it's really good to be partnered with an agent who has a lender that they work with. There's nothing like picking up the phone and calling your lender and saying, hey, I saw rates were going up today. What does that mean for so-and-so's interest rate?
Yep. Yeah. Lean heavily into the lender for that. And we get, as agents, like a daily or weekly rate card that we can always kind of keep in mind. But yeah, check with your lender.
Yeah, I have a few websites that I go to whenever a client calls me and I say, hey, this is the current rate. And I like to keep them updated. So to kind of clear out all that noise from the headlines and say, hey, these are some hard numbers and this is what it's looking like. So tell me, Curtis, what is this marry the house, date the rate that I keep hearing everywhere now?
I can't stand this. And if I hear it one more time, I will turn my head and spit.
I'll delete social media
right?
if I see it on one more
I
reel.
can't do it. Every
I'm
other
quitting.
agent is talking about this, and I think it's so lazy. They say, marry your home, date the rate. And I think in general concept, that's totally a good direction. Obviously, you don't want to rely on the rate when you make a choice to buy a home, but this whole idea that you can get into a really high payment up front and don't worry, rates are going to come down. You can refinance. What if rates don't come down?
It definitely kicks the can down the line. And, you know, I don't want it to seem like we're doing anything just to get you locked into a house. I mean, at the end of the day,
so car salesman-y.
I want my best client interest in mind, not just for the first 2 years or 5 years, but I want to make sure in 7 years they can still afford their home.
Totally. If rates don't go down, are you still going to be able to afford that home now? So marry the home, date the rate. If I never heard that again, it'd be great.
There are definitely great programs out there to get you into the home, and it's true, refinancing in the future is probably what a lot of people are going to be doing. But it's a lot more to it than just a catchy phrase.
Totally.
And how does that actually play out, and what does that mean? It means that you buy the house to marry it. So it's a long-term commitment. You're buying the property. You're dating the rate because if you don't like it, you can break up with it and you can get a new rate.
Yeah, I guess I get it. What are you telling people in this high interest rate market, high being relative, of course, to the 2 and 3% that we saw over the last 2 years? What are some options that current buyers can do when thinking about getting a mortgage?
So a few of my recent clients took advantage of adjustable rate mortgages, so ARMs. A very common right now is a 5-year ARM and a 7-year ARM. So for the first 5 or 7 years, you get a lower rate because you have potentially paid for a decreased amount on that rate to bring it down. And then thereafter, that fixed initial period, your rate is variable. So it pushes you out 5 or 7 years, and then at that time you can reevaluate what rates are looking like and you can potentially refinance.
I love this idea because people talk about the idea of a forever home and living there. And the majority of people are not going to be in their home for more than 5 or 7 years. So you're moving anyway in that time frame. You don't have to worry about potentially refinancing. I think especially for younger buyers, the millennial market, your life changes so much between the next 5 and 7 years, you're going to move anyway.
I've
going to
moved
have
so
a new
much
mortgage.
in the past 10 years.
I think I've moved every year for the last 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, back when I was renting, renters move every two years sometimes. I bought and sold 3 houses in the past probably 5 years. I don't recommend that for everybody, but sometimes it does work in your favor if you play the market right and you have a good agent.
Totally.
But yeah, obsessing over this idea of one rate for 30 years, even if you got a conventional loan, is just not something that people do when they buy a house. I've talked to many long-term owners that have refinanced 30-year conventional mortgages 4 or 5 times.
Totally. Yeah, my parents, I think, have a 30-year mortgage that they've refinanced probably 15 times since they've owned.
There is a cost to refinancing. It's not free. You do have to pay a little bit, but so long as you're in the home long enough after you refinance to recoup that expense, it could be a couple $100s a month, and you pay off your refinance charges in 24 months.
Yeah. And adjustable rate mortgages haven't been very common over the last 2 years because fixed rate mortgages have been so low. But I think now that we're seeing them hitting 6 and 7%, people might consider an ARM.
And that brings up another point, is that this whole higher or lower rates thing is all completely variable. So many people are saying, oh, how's business with rates being higher?
Yep.
My question is, higher than what? Higher than 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 30 years ago? I have people who telling me 7% still seems like a steal compared to where they were maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah. I think we got so spoiled in the pandemic when rates were 2 and 3%. We're never going to get back down to that. We need to forget about that being the ideal and be okay with rates being higher than that. I think it's a very healthy spot if you look over the last 2 decades that 5%, 6% are pretty average interest rate levels. And I think it's telling that some of the experts are predicting that over the next 18 months, we will see rates in the 5% again. So I talk to my clients about getting them understanding on what an average might be versus what we were really spoiled with during a time where the Fed rate was at 0%.
It was artificially low.
Yeah, artificially low is a good way to put it.
And really, you're living in your monthly payment. You're not living in this idea of, I'm not running around telling everyone, I got a 2% interest rate. What's yours?
Well, some people do that.
I mean, I'd be pretty proud of it too. But you're living in your monthly payment, and that's what you're paying. So the interest rate is the cost to borrow money. It's the cost you have to pay to buy the house because you don't have $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 to pay in full. 5, 6, 7% is a pretty low cost to get someone to loan you several $100,000s to pay back to them. If it gets you to a place where you're happy, where you can feel good, where you like getting up every morning, that is worth it to me.
If you're comfortable
valuable.
Paying the monthly payment on a home that you love, does it matter what the interest rate was?
I just look at my monthly payment.
There you go. It's not about the purchase price. It's not about your HOA. Well, it is about your HOA and your taxes and your interest rate, but it's not about those purchase prices. We don't live in that. We live in that monthly payment.
True, your payment is split. Half of it's going to interest, half of it's going to principal. Everyone wants to pay down their principal faster. But the truth is, there's always a cost to borrowing money. If you think about credit cards, interest rates are double digits, high double digits.
Yep.
So comparing that to the interest rate on your mortgage looks like a steal.
It sure does. Nobody talks about that.
That's why you don't buy a house on a credit card.
There you go. I don't think you're allowed to. So what do you think is the biggest takeaway when it comes to mortgage rates? I think from my perspective, it's really focus on making sure that it's the right time to buy for you and focus on, again, living in that monthly payment. And if you're comfortable, it's the right time.
And it's inventory. Inventory does not come and go the way interest rates come and go.
Yep.
If you have a favorite neighborhood, a favorite pocket of the city that you like, a favorite suburb, or a favorite school district for your kids, and that house pops up for sale and you have to buy in that area, rates and the idea of that goes out the window because that's where you physically need to be, regardless of what's going on in the market. Sure, you could have great low interest rates, but if you don't find the house that you want, what's the point of buying something you don't like just because it's cheap? That's actually a waste of money.
Yep. The dream home is more important than a higher rate.
That's why they say you marry the home. I get it now.
Oh, all right, Joe. Well, with that, I'm Curtis Crotty.
And I'm Joe Deerdorf.
We'll see you guys next week.
Or next month.
Or whenever we get around to doing this again.
Yeah. When rates come down. That was cheesy. We should redo that.
I love it. No,
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.